The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Hello and welcome to episode 89 of The Best in the World with Richard Parr. If you haven't heard of this podcast before, what we do is we speak to Olympic champions, world record holders or world number ones to find out what they do differently from the rest of us to fulfill their sporting ambitions to be the very, very best. And by listening to all of these amazing athletes, we learn things that not only can help our sporting ambitions, but in many cases our everyday lives. Because I'm pretty useless at sports, but I still have a life. Well, kind of. You know what I mean. This week, my guest is from the world of squash. She's a former world number one, a winner of the World Open from 2013. It's the English squash player Laura Massaro. The first thing I've got to say about Laura, which I really like about her, is the fact that when we had this conversation at the very start, she says that she feels so honoured to be a part of this podcast because of all of the guests that we've had before on this programme. And she took the time to listen to a few episodes, and she even mentions it in this podcast that she was listening to our episode with Stephen Hendry. It's really lovely when some of these guests do this, and others have done it in the past, and I'm sure others will in the future. But the main reason I'm bringing this up is because it just shows that even the best in the world, people such as Laura, are still always trying to learn from the other best in the world. We're always learning. There was a podcast recently I did with Antonio Carlos Jr., the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, and he was talking about how he was reading books by Ronda Rousey, for example, trying to learn from the best, and that's what we do on this podcast. This week from Laura, we learn a lot of different things, including the journey she took to become world number one, when she found out that she would become the best in the world, and also how she coped with it, how she coped with the pressure of being the best in the world in squash. She talks about playing in the era of Nicole David, who was the world number one for 9 years. We also talk about the relationship she has with her sponsors, and in fact how one of her sponsors has taken on an almost mentor role with her. So that is all in this amazing podcast with Laura Massaro coming up in just a few moments. If you do like what we do here at The Best in the World with Richard Parr, we do it for you for free. We've been doing this for nearly 2 years now, and we're looking to get some support from you. Some of you have already done it by going to patreon.com/best in the world. But if you like what we do and you want to support us, it's very easy. All you have to do is go to that website, patreon.com/best in the world, and you can be supporting our program, keeping it on the air from as little as $1 a month. I'm not going to talk much more about that because I want to get on with this interview. I want to listen to Laura Massaro because she is the best in the world.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Laura Massaro, world squash champion. Welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr. So great to have you on the program. And the whole point of this program is for us to learn from the very best, to learn from people like you. But when you were growing up, who were some of the people that you looked up to and tried to learn from?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I feel like I'm in great company with all of the champions that you've had on the show so far. So feeling privileged to be part of that. I guess, in terms of athletes who I looked up to, I think from a squash perspective, for anyone who obviously understands squash and has followed any of the squash tour, Sarah Fitzgerald was a huge idol of mine growing up. She was world champion, world number one, dominated for a period of time while she was on tour. She's Australian, but I was lucky enough to have her based in Manchester at the back end of my junior, early senior career. And she was kind enough to give up some of her time and get on court with me. And so that idol ended up becoming more of a friend. And I learned so much from her. Looking back, I think at the time you don't really realise how much you're taking in off them. But now looking back, to have that sort of help from an idol was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and sometimes they say never meet your idols, but actually in that case it proved to be pretty good for you. Is there one bit of advice from her that always stuck with you at all?
I think I think actually it was more recent when I got the world number one spot for the first time. And again, anyone who's followed squash will know, maybe I don't think I actually believed at the point that it happened that it probably would ever happen at that point. I'd been on tour, for 12 years, and Nicole David had been world number one for 9 straight years, extremely dominant. A few of us had been trying to chip away. When I finally got that world number one spot, it was obviously, as you can imagine, a really big deal. And she actually texted me and said to me, make sure that you say it out loud. And I sort of didn't really understand what she meant. I'd played a match in Hong Kong, which I never really realised that as a player that you would actually play a match for the world number one, because the squash rankings work really similar to the tennis rankings in that, they come out on the first of the month, and you could be anywhere. You could just be at the gym training, and they come out and you're like, oh, you've gone to world number one. So when I was in Hong Kong and I actually played a semi-final match, and the PSA, Professional Squash Association, said to me, if you win this match, you go to world number one next month. It was obviously a lot of pressure on that one match, and I managed to win that match in the semi-final, and know that regardless of what happened in the final the next day, on the 1st of January, I would go to world number one, which was obviously New Year's Eve going into New Year's Day. So a really good New Year's Eve celebration, which was brilliant. But it actually meant that I had about a month until the next tournament for it all to sink in. And she texted me and said, as I said, just, say it out loud to yourself. And it was funny because no one really ever does say that to you. You say it, you sort of think it in your head. Wow, can't believe I've done it. I've got there. People say congratulations. But it was a massive, big thing for her to say to me, because when I got introduced onto court in that first tournament, and it was at the Tournament of Champions in New York, and we have a court put up in Grand Central Station, which is unbelievable. And I got introduced to my first match as current world number one. I was really glad she'd text me that piece of advice, because I think I would have just been a rabbit in headlights otherwise. But athletes say, don't they, about visualizing, about preparing, and even just those small moments like being introduced onto the court was a really, really big deal for me. And I'm really, really glad that I did say it out loud to myself.
In some ways, in future matches, did it make you more confident in any way? Did it, in that whole, I am the best in the world, I am the world number one, or did it add more pressure? Did it work in either way?
I actually think it worked in both ways, in different situations, in different matches. It obviously depends who you play in, what round you're playing, how long I'd had that world number one spot for. I'm not going to lie, the first tournament that I played, I definitely think it carried more of a weight. Even with that advice and all the advice that I'd had, it definitely carried a little bit more of weight, because you go into tournaments at the top of the draw, people are expecting you to win every single match. And the funny thing is, as world number two, which I had been for a long time, you go in and people expect you to make the final, but I never really saw that as the same pressure as, you're world number one. I think it's just everyone's after you. Anyone who's been world number one on your podcast has probably said that everybody seems to raise their game against you when you play the world number one, because they honestly have nothing to lose. So you have that to contend with. And in a lot of ways, it's made me appreciate a lot more what Nicole David did as world number one for 9 straight years, how to have everybody chomping at her heels the way that they must have been for that time is even makes it even more impressive. So I definitely felt like it was a little bit of a weight in that first period, but then as I started to get to grips with it a little bit more and sort of understand where I was coming from, I started to just get back to the basics of, looking after the processes, making sure that I was trying to get the best performances that I could out on court, and sort of put that ranking and everything that comes with that to the back of my mind a little bit more. And then I started to really draw upon it as a strength a little bit.
What are your feelings towards Nicole David? Because there must be part of you which thinks, if she wasn't around, I'd have been world number one and a lot quicker. And if she wasn't around, I'd have won a lot more world titles. But then also there must be part of it where it's like, actually, now I am world number one and I've stopped this like 9-year dominance, it must mean even more to you.
Yeah, and there was a long time, and I think I'm sure there's a lot of squash players over that period that have thought, I would have won a heck of a lot more titles, and as you say, got to world number one. I spent a lot more months there than I have done so far. But at the same time, I really think that I am the player that I am because of who she is and who she's been over the course of my career. I mean, we've come through juniors together. We're the same age, so as harsh as that is on me in some ways, that I've managed to, time my whole career at the same time as one of the greatest squash players that's ever lived, then to also get to world number one in that period of time, to also win the titles that I have in that period of time, in a lot of ways makes it even more special. And as I say, I am the player that I am because of the level that she set. And I think a lot of players on tour have her to thank for the level of women's squash that's currently being played right now. She brought a physicality to women's squash that hadn't been seen before. And we've all had to step up our game. We've all had to work really, really hard. The women's game is probably at the strongest it's ever been. And she's actually now ranked 6 or 7 in the world. So she's dropped down from those heights of, world number one, but still, firmly established in the top 10 and a force to be reckoned with on any day. But she's certainly been almost the reason that she's 6 or 7 in the world, because people have just been chasing her, and she set the bar, and we all had to raise to that level to get anywhere near her, and eventually a few of us have. So I think that's, for the sport, it's positive. It's positive that she isn't winning everything all the time anymore. And, although it's a little bit disappointing in some ways from my point of view, I don't think I can really say that I would change it if I had another option.
We've briefly touched on the mental aspect of sport and of squash so far, but why don't you just give us an insight into what would be going through your mind before a big match, the hour or so before, and were there any processes that you'd particularly go through?
I think as I've got older, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's superstition necessarily, but I think as you get older, you definitely get into routines, habits, things that work for you and that have worked in past events. So you tend to stick with them. It doesn't ever tend to be anything that I desperately need. So, nothing that I wouldn't be able to get hold of or do necessarily. It's all within myself, but it's become a pretty set routine, I'd say. I try, a squash player is very similar to any racket sport, I'm sure. Go down in the morning, have a practice on the court that we're playing on, and then it really is just switch off until match time. Obviously athletes are brilliant at watching box sets and killing time. You become a pro at definitely killing time. So you try to just do whatever you can to switch your mind off from the game. Otherwise, you're just burning nervous energy. And I learned that really early on, that the more you think about a match, the more drained you are by the time you get to the match, particularly if it's you're on an evening schedule. So it's just about switching off as much as I can, really trying to focus these days on, squashes, and it's not the end of the world, win or lose. Take a really sort of light-hearted attitude towards it through the day, and know that within myself that I've got a real grit, a real determination, a will to win when I step on that court. So for someone like me with the drive to win and perform and never give up, no matter what the score, I know that I can switch off during the day and know that I'll always want to win when I step on the court. Whereas I can understand that for someone else, maybe switching off and trying to enjoy the day wouldn't necessarily work. But for me, it's a way to stop that nervous energy. And then about an hour out from the match, maybe about, depending on obviously how far we are away from the court, about an hour and 20 minutes, I normally go out of my hotel room and either down to the court or down to the lobby of the hotel, and I sit and get a coffee, and I write my goals down for the match, how I want to play, who I'm playing, if I've played them before, any learnings from that match. I generally, the last couple of years, I speak to pretty much he's actually my main sponsor, but he started off as my sponsor and a sort of, which is a good way around to do it, has slowly become a bit more of a mentor and definitely a friend to me. And we speak before every match that I play, and he just tells me how amazing I am and how well I'm going to play, and that I'm totally, dominant, and that my squash is going to be the highest level it's going to be. And he basically just tells me that I can go out there and do it. And then I grab, a car or the transport down to the court, and then my warm up starts about 45 minutes before the match, and I go through the same warm up, just trying to stay relaxed again, but trying to just get a little bit more clarity on what it is, on the game plan that I've set out and my goals that I've set out before I've started my warm up, and then normally just try and time it as well as I can to start time or the match before that's finishing, and hit the ground hard and start the match well. And that's pretty much the routine that I have. Nothing special, but it is very, I guess it's very professional. It's very routine based. It's very familiar, and those things work really well for me.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to delve deeper in quite a few of those things there. The most random one, though, begins with what box sets?
Well, I guess it depends on where you are in the world, but there's so many. I mean, I've listened to a few of your podcasts and heard a lot of the athletes say very similar ones. Definitely love a bit of sort of the trashy box sets that are addictive, like Scandal and suits. I'm into suits at the moment. I did a whole bike session before, just with suits in the background, so I'm actually not sure how much of that I'm taking in, but I just had it on in the background listening to that while I was on the watt bike, which is a piece of machine from hell, so that definitely killed a little bit of time. At home, generally, obviously, massively looking forward to Game of Thrones. I love House of Cards. Got into Westworld a little bit. That was a new one started just before a few months ago, which was great. And Billions is also a good one. So I mean, I've watched a lot of box sets, and I also watch a lot of documentaries as well, and movies, and spending a lot of time on flights. Obviously, it's a good way to kill time. On the way back from Dubai, I just watched the Ion Bolt documentary, which I'd recommend to anyone who's who likes watching sport and coaching, and how his relationship with his coach. So that was a really good one to watch.
Is that the one where they're filming him kind of doing the high knees in the swimming pool quite near the start?
Yeah, I think so. It's the one that's got the lead. He basically it's an unbelievable documentary because it follows him from Beijing pretty much, I think, from what I can remember. Beijing through London and up to Rio. And to have a documentary that covers that amount of time is, I think, is unbelievable for an athlete. Because obviously you don't know in Beijing that he's going to go on to achieve what he's going to achieve. So that was a really good one to watch.
Yeah, I think that's the recent movie that you've seen, and I think I saw a documentary before, and it covered a lot of when he lost the World's Championships final.
Okay.
To the other guy whose name has just slipped my mind. But very similar box sets to what I love, but also what a few of the other champions do as well. Big fan of Billions at the moment.
Yeah, loving that.
A few other questions from your answer a moment ago. Who is your sponsor? Can you say who that person is?
Yeah. So the company is called UK Fast. It's a web host and design cloud space company, and the guy who owns it is called Lawrence Jones, and he basically set the company up from nothing. It's now a massive company, winning awards left, right and centre. His office is unbelievable. It's based in Manchester, and I've been normally going meet him over there with whenever I'm having sessions with him away from tournaments, and his office is just like Google. It's got a slide from floor 3 to reception, a massive chessboard in reception to play, a bar on Friday night, a huge auditorium. It's just colourful everywhere. And, the way that he conducts his business is a massive, he's had me in on Monday morning meetings to his superiors and said that they've been so inspired and motivated by me, but just every time I step into his office, I get motivated and inspired by the way that he leads, by the way that he treats his staff, the way that he gives all the time, no matter what. And I've really tried to embrace that and copy that as much as I can. And although sport is a very lonely place at times, and you have to be very single-minded, you have to be selfish. I think at this point in my career, particularly 33, there's a time to start to give back a little bit more, to appreciate the sport, to appreciate the career that I've had. And, I know that I'm not going to have many more years at the top of professional sport. So to try and sort of enjoy that side of things a little bit more. And the last time I was there, he's got a full kitted out gym. So I just, last time I was there, I just embraced that. And I think I listened to your Stephen Hendry podcast down there. So it was a brilliant session, and it's all thanks to him. And, the facilities he's got are unbelievable.
Fantastic. And it's always good when you're getting mutually beneficial relationships like that and friendships from it. How did you guys come to meet, and what is the process for a squash player such as yourself to get sponsorship? Is it quite a grueling task?
It can be, particularly when you're younger, I think. I'm lucky now at this stage in my career that I have a brilliant manager, and she she's a woman, which I think massively helps me. I'm sure a lot of your female athletes have said the same, that to have a female manager and someone who really rates what you do and puts it at the very highest order in terms of speaking to sponsors is an unbelievable thing. And she's almost pushing me to value myself and ask for what I'm worth, and that's been unbelievable. But it's also obviously significantly easier to do that when you are at the very top of your game. So I appreciate that perhaps wouldn't be the case if I was to slip down a little bit. But at the moment, I think it's always hard to get sponsors just because of the competition in different sports, because of the profile. While squash is growing and we are getting a lot more TV coverage, it's still a minority sport. So it is hard in some ways. The squash side of it takes care of itself in terms of racket sponsors. I'm lucky enough to be sponsored by Head, and I think they're brilliant rackets, and they've supported me for the last six or 7 years. And I definitely plan on seeing my career out with them. They've been brilliant, and to have fellow athletes on board on the tennis side like Sharapova, Djokovic, Murray, who all play with Head, is just fantastic to be part of such a brilliant company. Again, sort of goes without saying on the kit side, I'm sponsored by ASICS. That's only been the last couple of years, and they do, in my opinion, the best squash shoe around. So that was a bit of a no-brainer, and absolutely love their kit as well. But yeah, from a bit more of a sort of what you would say outside of sport sponsorship, sometimes it's just generally being in the right place at the right time. And I was just having a hit down at one of the clubs in Manchester, where Lawrence is a member, and he'd been playing a little bit of casual squash. He just enjoys the game, and obviously, as a lot of people do, it's a brilliant way to keep fit while having fun and playing a game. So he was down actually on the court after me and thought I was half decent, and sort of came off, and he says he said to the guy I was playing, "Oh, she looks half decent," and he said, "Oh yeah, she's top 10 in the world," and he went, "Oh yeah, what does that mean? She's 10 then?" And he sort of has a bit of a cheeky joke like that. And I think I was probably about maybe four in the world at the time, and yeah, he just sort of said to me, "Oh, do you fancy getting to world number one?" And he says that I said, "No one will ever get to world number one because Nicole David's there." And bearing in mind this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And he went, "Well, no one ever will with that attitude, will they?" and I argue to this day that I can't imagine that that's something that I would say, but he hasn't plucked it from nowhere. So I'm a bit unsure whether I did or not. And we've worked together just, on the mental side a little bit, mentoring the same way that he's had a really good attitude with his company. He's taught me a lot about goal setting and built up my self-belief, and really our relationship has gone from there. And like I said, it really was just being in the right place at the right time, and him taking a little bit of an interest in having a massive interest in sport in general. He's also title sponsor for Sale Sharks Rugby at the moment, shirt sponsor for them. So just a massive sports fan. And he obviously liked my personality and liked my work ethic when he watched me on court, and the relationship's gone from there, really.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
We'll be back with Laura in just a moment, but I want to say about Audible. You may have heard me mention Audible before, and do you know why? Because it's a product I personally use, and it's a product that you can use for free. Yes, for 30 days, and that includes one free audio book download. I've listened to lots of books on Audible. I've listened to books by Carlo Ancelotti, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Andreas Iniesta, just to name a few. They're all fantastic. They're all available at audibletrial.com/best. That's where you'll get your free trial. That's audibletrial.com/best. And you could be listening to books on your MP3 player, your Kindle, your iPhone, your iPad. Go and check it out. I listen to it in the gym, while I'm walking, while I'm on the train, while I'm on a bus. I'm always listening and learning to the greatest minds and greatest sports stars on the planet, thanks to Audible. All right, let's continue to learn from one of the greatest squash players on the planet. It's Laura Massaro.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Let's talk about goal setting, as you mentioned it, and earlier you said about writing down what your goals were for the match.
Yeah.
How often do you set your goals on a regular basis, and is it always written down? Is it always handwritten? Do you have a little notebook, or is it any bit of paper you can find? What's your process for all of that?
Yeah, well, I think majority of athletes have notebooks everywhere. I think I haven't got one. I've got about 6 or 7, and they're all for slightly different things. You know, some of them are training diaries or notebooks. Some of them are, you know, if I'm reading a decent book and I've got a couple of things I want to write down. Some of them are, you know, I've been helping out with some of the England junior development squads, and I try and plan and give a little bit back to them where I can. And then some of them are just, like my goals. And I try not to be too rigid with the goal setting. Generally, probably at any time where I feel like I need a little bit more focus, where there's been a significant period of time for training, like now we're in the off season for a squash player. So most of June, July and August is the downtime, sort of summer training for us. So probably as the season becomes a little bit closer, back end of August, I'll start to, you know, write my goals down. I have my goals in my head for what I want to achieve through summer. And I think the same way a lot of athletes do, I'm very sort of visual, picture based in my own mind. So I see where I want my game to go. I see where I want to be by the time the season kicks in. And then in terms of goal setting, I think that's just more of my routine when I'm at a tournament. So just, I like to write it down, how I want to play, just, you know, whether I'm positive, whether I want, you know, what it is I want to achieve from a tactical point of view. And then also just reviewing my matches as well. I like to review them after. So in the same notebook, just write down what went well, what I could do better next time. And then sort of a really good way to put that match to bed, because I think as an athlete, you can really overanalyze after a match is finished. You can relive rallies, relive points, and that can, you know, if you've come through a match and won, it can really affect how well you sleep. So it's a really good way to have mentally putting a match to bed, I think, being able to write it down, get it out of your system, and then move on.
Fantastic. It must help quite a bit as well. The Squash TV cover quite a lot of events now. Yeah,
unbelievable. And their online platform, you know, just Squash TV in general on streaming at every event is so professional. And any match that I need to see, you know, I pretty much can watch my match back within probably instantly. If I wanted to, I can watch my match back. So I quite often like to watch the match back, write my review, and then put that match to bed. But also, you know, very, very sort of planned and and tactically aware, as the commentators like to say a lot. So like to watch my opponent before I play and get my head straight on what it is I want to do. And then for all major semis and finals now, we've got TV contracts with different platforms all over the world. In the UK, it's BT Sport, and they show all of our major semis and finals. And that's been a huge boost to the sport. And just, I mean, I think it's shown the professionalism that they have on Squash TV, and how well the game has moved on, and the settings that we have. As I said, Grand Central Station, the event we just played was in the Dubai Opera House, first ever sporting event to be held in the Opera House, which only opened in August just gone. So it's one of those sports that, you can put a glass court anywhere in the world and have it in the most spectacular of locations. And I think that certainly helps with the online coverage and the TV coverage.
You've spoken quite a bit about giving back, and you've been doing more and more coaching now. How's that been going?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it coaching. I basically said to the England development coaches, so the ones that are working with our young up and coming England squash players, that I'd really like to get involved a little bit more. It is really hard for me to commit because obviously I've got a really busy schedule, and I need to be concentrating on my own training and things that go with that. But where I can, I've been trying to join in with the EDP squads, we call them, the England development squads. And luckily for me and for them, I guess, the squads are mainly in Manchester at our National Squash Centre, which is the legacy from the Manchester 2002 games. And it's really close to home for me. So it's great. I can go over, I can basically just have a hit with the girls and the boys as well, but predominantly the girls, to help them feel the level that they're aiming for, the way that I hit the ball, my professionalism, the amount of times I've turned up, and, the sort of, just like as 16, 15, 17-year-old girls are sort of chatting away, and I'll just crack on with my warm-up. And a lot of it's just sort of making them aware of it, leading by example. It's more than just what you put in when you stand on the court. It's the warm-ups, it's the cool-downs, it's the little bits that you do extra. And I guess just having me around is just opening their eyes to that. I mean, quite often they don't do it with me. Quite sometimes they do. And you sort of can just hopefully let them see what you're doing. And maybe if they go away and copy it, then that'll be, just a little bit of a 1% that might make them, win a match maybe. I don't know. So I've been definitely helping with that. I'd love to get involved a little bit more with that as my career maybe comes to an end. But I certainly don't want to overplay that role while I am still trying to play. And I go on those squads, and I'm very much, although I'm obviously with the coaches and I'm there trying to help and offer feedback, I'm very much one of the players. Get on court with them and do the exact same sessions that they are, where the coaches obviously stand out the back. So I sort of feel as it's the best way that I can play it, because being on court with the players is the best way to feel what's going on. And sometimes coaching can lack that side of things, where they don't get on court with the players and they can't feel the subtleties, what's going on. And although as a coach, you're from the outside and you can see what's going on the court and from the outside, and that's great. To have that other perspective of a semi-coach, semi-player being able to offer a perspective from the coach to the coach from the inside the court is a different perspective. So I hope that that's been really helpful. And I never thought that I would want to coach, but the way that I feel I can give back to particularly young girls, and what I've learned over my career, and how, I'm definitely by no means one of the most talented squash players there is. It's been a lot of hard work, consistency, dedication over time, that I just want to show them that you can be English, British, whatever it is, and compete with all of these Egyptians that are coming out of the woodwork, and, all these other squash players that are playing really, really well at the moment, and they can do it. Even though they're, in England, and there's not that many of us in the top 10 anymore.
Why do you think that is? What's making Egypt in particular so good and so competitive?
Oh, it's a good question. I get asked it a lot. I think it's just success breeds success. I think it takes a long time to build up. It was the same with, the English and the Australians dominated squash for a long time. It's taken a long time for that to stop. And the Egyptians have sort of slowly but surely come around. And I think when you look at the way how many players they have, it's that old sort of, I guess, throw 100 eggs at a wall and one won't break, and they've just got this pot of squash players that is unbelievable. Honestly, there was over 130 I heard in the under 13 boys national championships. Wow. Which is unheard of. And you're not telling me that one or two of those is not going to be very, very special when they're already competing against another 100 and odd under 13 boys. So it's that pool of players. It's the fact that they already have so many players at the top. I think they can learn from the best, and it brings out that extra little bit of competitiveness as well. And I think to even be the best in your country, you have to be phenomenal. In England, it's become, when I was younger, to be the best in England was a really, really big deal, and it's still a really big deal to be number one in England. But on a world level, being number one in England doesn't quite mean the same as it did back then. Whereas in Egypt, if you're number one in Egypt, you're borderline number one in the world at junior level, so and at senior level. So there's players there's players on the world rankings who are 2 in Egypt and they're 3 in the world, and it's things like that really. And I think it's success breeds success, and it's just become a little bit of a hotbed at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out in the next few years.
But this year the World Championships is in your backyard. It's in Manchester. Is that going to make a difference?
Hopefully, I hope it will. Obviously, anytime you can play at home is unbelievable, and I've won 2 British Open titles, which is our most prestigious event alongside the World Championships. It's our Wimbledon. It's got the most history behind it. It's the longest running professional squash event, and I managed to win my second British Open title in March just gone, beating the world number one in the semi-final. And it was a really, really special time because it's not only is it a hugely prestigious event and very, very hard to win, but it's at home and everyone gets to come and watch you play. I had friends and family come down, and it just makes it even more special. And the crowd are unbelievable, particularly in the latter stages of events where it can really make a difference. I was 2-0 down against the world number one in the semi-final, and the crowd arguably got me over the line. So we're combined first equal prize money joint men and women's world championships in Manchester in December, and to have so many women and male players in contention for that title when it comes around in December is hopefully going to be something really special. And the last time we had a world championships for the women in Manchester was in 2008, I think, and I was nowhere near sort of where I'm ranked now. So it'll be a really special occasion, and definitely a way probably for me to look at that process and go even more routine based, because I can imagine, although it's going to be hugely exciting, it's also going to be quite stressful, and a lot of expectation there as well. So it's about dealing with all that, and hopefully I can draw on those experiences of winning the British Opens to play my best there.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you all the best for that, Laura. It's been really special speaking to you on this week's podcast. Really learnt a lot from you. Before we wrap this up, can you just let us know where we can find out more about you online so we can continue to follow your journey, please?
Yeah. So I'm pretty active probably on Twitter and Facebook the most. So I think my Twitter handle is at LJ Massaro, and my Facebook athlete page is just Laura Massaro, I think, Laura Massaro Squash. So they're the best places to follow me. And I've also got a website, which I could do better at updating, but there's definitely a few more pictures and blogs and things on there as well. And that's lauramassaro.co.uk.
You can worry about that once you finish your career. You can update it then. Laura, it's been so great to speak to you. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for being the best in the world. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
An absolute pleasure speaking to Laura on this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr. The second time we've had a squash player on this programme. Maybe go back and listen to my conversation with Jenny Duncalf. That was only a few episodes ago. It's on our website, sportacino.com. It's at Acast. That's acast.com/best. It's also on iTunes, and we speak to a range of different sports stars, not just from squash, and they really vary in the different sports that we cover. We've done lots of MMA. One of the most confident people I've ever spoken to is Dan Severn. Go back and listen to that. And then at the other end of the scale, you might want to listen to one of the real pioneers of darts. John Lowe has been on the programme. They're all available on iTunes, Acast, Sportacino.com, as well as many, many more. As I mentioned, this is episode 89, so we've got 88 previous episodes with world champions, Olympic champions, world record holders, and world number ones for you to listen and learn from. So please go and do that. We'll have more episodes coming up for you in the future, starting from next week. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful time. All right, take care. Goodbye.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.